Hold on to your butts.
Don't move, you're surrounded by armed bastards.
What are we going to do?
Well, I say let's get out there and twat it.
Welcome back to the Cabin Night Podcast. I'm Rob.
I'm Jake.
I'm James.
Today's discussion is about our albums that describe our musical taste. So it's not necessarily a list of our favourite albums. Some of our favourite albums may appear on that list, but it is ones that describe the diversity of our musical tastes. So before we get there, we invite you to grab a drink, make yourself comfortable, and enjoy the discussion. So, I've been thinking about how to do this. Obviously, when we did the Disney one, we did straight through, do yours. I don't kind of do it that way. I want to try and do it a different way. So, number one album. They're not obviously it's.
Mine are in no particular order.
I assume we've all got like a heavy-ish album and possibly one that you wouldn't expect based on the other lists to be in there. Like not an outstanding one, but one that's far removed from metal, I assume. So
Maybe more than one.
well, yeah, but I assume we've got that sort of extreme from the heavy to the. So I'll start with Jake. Go to the left. What is the album that describes your most heavy, extreme, far out taste?
It would be Death's Scream Bloody Go, released in '87, as godfathers of what is now known as old school death metal. It actually falls quite in line with what we spoke about with Lords of Chaos, in that they were essentially sort of starting a scene. They were starting a new sort of music. Never been. Thrash was a thing, punk was a thing. A combination of the two, really, with the introduction of really violent or graphic lyrics or song content. So yeah, it would be Death's Scream Bloody Go. Specifically, the song Zombie Ritual, which starts with a wonderful little twiddly riff, which sounds to my ear almost sort of Egyptian, which I suppose is the ritual aspect of it. They're very ritualistic in the death rites and things like that. But then it just goes into just a really nasty old school death metal song. There's a song on there called Regurgitated Guts, which is about regurgitating those things.
About ponies.
Yes, it's about ponies. And then the song Denial of Life, which I think the bass. So something I've always loved about Death is their bass lines, their bass tracks in the music. It's very much so. Bass is sort of a complementary instrument to the rest of the band, whereas it's almost like the bass on that album, it's doing its own thing.
Okay.
And it works. It works. Very bass heavy, but it works.
So, like Maiden, for example, where the bass is a prominent feature rather than it just, like I say, supplementing
the part of the rhythm section,
in the background.
Okay. So mine's nowhere near that heavy. Mine's really not, and I would argue maybe a controversial one, because I think you would definitely argue it's not that heavy. And it's not even one of my favourite albums. I think I was to rank a top 10 of my favourite albums, it wouldn't be in there. But I'm just trying to think for how heavy it is and how diverse the album is and what it's got on it. I'm going to say In Waves by Trivium.
Okay.
Because there are songs in there that are pretty, like Dusk Dismantled is a proper guttural script. Doors, my door. So it kind of leans into the more heavy stuff. I don't like it heavy like your Death and Cannibal Corpse and things like that. I kind of go, yeah, I'm piecing out now. But I don't mind like fringe elements of it, which is why I don't mind things like Amon Amarth and things like. Because I don't mind sort of the outskirts of the heavier things. And Trivium kind of glaze in and glaze out of that. It's got some really tasty riffs on there, really, really good riffs. Well, a couple of my favourite Trivium songs are from that album, like Caustic Are the Ties That Bind, which again not many people seem to put in the upper echelons of Trivium songs, but I really like Caustic Are the Ties because it's got a really good melody, really good solo.
The heavy passages are really heavy.
Heavy passages. Proper double bass all the way through the album, to be fair. It's also one of the first albums I got because I read an article on it. So I was intrigued by the entire album because I remember going on holiday to Pisa. And we're in the airport waiting to go, and I wanted something to read because I brought a book with me, but I just wasn't bothered by the book. So I went to W.H. Smith, and Metal Hammer was on it. It had Matt Heafy on the cover, and took it in waves. So I thought, oh, I'll get that. It's £5. I'll read that.
Interesting. That's interesting, as we will soon find out. Carry on.
Okay. So I thought, I'll read this. And I read the article on the plane. Because that was it. Because my other book I had with me was quite a heavy one. Because it was Corey Taylor's 7 Deadly Sins. Which is a heavy read. You read about 2 or 3 pages of that and you go, bloody hell, I want something a bit lighter to read. So I thought an article about the album I thought was quite interesting. So I was really intrigued by the album. By reading about it. And the turbulence they had coming up to it. Because the original drummer had not long left. So everything like that in the writing process. So I was intrigued that one. At that point, it was probably one of the heavier things I was listening to as well. So I'd say for that, In Waves, while slightly repetitive, is a really fun song. And I think
it's a good finisher for the set as well. So.
I don't know. I've not seen them since the Crusade days.
Predates In Waves.
Predates In Waves.
Well, James, they always finish with In Waves.
Do they? Oh, that's good. So I'd say, while not the heaviest thing I listen to, I would argue that as a representation of the different types of heavy I listen to, In Waves is a really good album to demonstrate the different aspects of that.
Okay. I really struggle with this one because they're, much like James, there are lots of bands I listen to that are heavy. Like I think Amon Amarth are heavier than the album I have picked. I listen to heavier things than what I have picked, but as an album, I think it best describes mine, and I know Jake will disagree with the album I have picked by said band. Because we do disagree on this.
It's not Saint Anger, is it?
Ruined it already. So I'm picking Lamb of God, and I am picking Resolution, not
Wrath.
Not Wrath.
Okay.
Because it's one of them things where that album, as a whole, all the albums that I've picked, I have picked them while they do exhibit the range of what I listen to. I also don't skip a track on them. They are full, complete albums to me. Whereas other stuff, like I really like the Surgical Steel Carcass album from 2014, but there is quite a bit that I don't listen to, and that is by far heavier than the Lamb of God. So it's a bit, again, a little bit of that change where it's not necessarily the heaviest thing to listen to, it is possibly, it's more constantly heavy than. So yeah, Lamb of God, Resolution.
Okay.
So we'll go the other way. The most out of the box, the lightest album as such that you would, the
Tough one.
Tough
one because on my list I've got two that kind of fit into that category. I'll go with probably the more out of the box one because there is heaviness to the other one. It could be argued here, but anyway.
We've argued heavy before with all the podcast, but we've argued heavy before, so that might have been an episode in itself. But.
So 1981's self-titled album by the Stray Cats. It is it's an album where obviously rock and roll had been a thing for many years by this point, but it was the revival period. The 80s is where you really started getting some of your really sort of hardcore psychobilly bands and bands that were rock and roll but with a level of attitude that you'd never seen before. And Stray Cats, to my mind, always towed that line between sort of 1950s rock and roll and the more modern sort of psychobilly. There's certainly the psychobilly elements throughout that self-titled album. Songs on there, Stray Cat Stroke, which was the first Stray Cat song I'd ever heard, and it's I don't know what it's about, to be honest. It's about sort of doing your own thing and just really not giving a shit what other people think, all told through the medium of cats for some reason.
Why not?
Well, why not? Well, I mean, there's a film that came out recently which is a very good reason as to why you shouldn't use cats to tell a story. But yeah, Rock This Town, which is just a fun old school rock and roll track. It's about going out, getting into a fight and dancing to rock and roll music. It's pretty much all it's about. But the third track that I'm going to mention from the album, Rumble in Brighton, which I think sort of best describes that psychobilly element that I mentioned earlier. It's very very guitar led. It's the lyrics are quite not insignificant, but if the song existed without the lyrics or with different lyrics, it'd still be an incredible song because it's very guitar led. It's very, it's all about the different things that Brian Setzer can do with a guitar, and not in the same way that like Tom Morello does it because he thinks it sounds cool, or he's just doing something different for the sake of being different. He's getting guitar tones out of his guitar that make sense within the context of the music, but are still very different to anything you've heard in rock and roll before. So yeah.
Okay.
So getting out of the box, it's like, I don't know, I'm probably going to go in a completely different direction now. I mean, umming and ahhing between two albums for this spot, both by the same person technically. But I think I'm going to go for the Inception soundtrack by Hans Zimmer. Because I really like...
Okay. It's out of the box.
It is out of the box. It's definitely not metal. Well, it depends how you... Again, it depends how you define heavy. But I was torn between this one and the Dark Knight soundtrack, both by Hans Zimmer. But I feel like the Inception soundtrack has a more wide range of what I like about soundtracks on it. So there's a kind of more ambience pieces that are more kind of soundscapes that really lend to a mood, and the really action heavy stuff that kind of, pulsates what's happening on screen. And also it's the best album that shows the frustrated rock star that is Hans Zimmer. As there's actually a guitar solo on that album. The last track, Time, has a guitar solo. It's also the famous album that's got all the noises that is in lots of trailers now. It's just, I really like sort of instrumental pieces that lend itself to a mood and lend itself to a feeling rather than a concept, or rather than telling a story, rather than talk about emotions. It's just instrumental. And while you may listen to it remembering the film you've seen, you can also create new in your head. You can create new images, create new sort of scapes to go with it. So it's just, for me, I really like soundtracks. I could have picked a couple other ones like the Tolkien soundtrack by Thomas Newman. It's a really ethereal one because obviously it's all about writing Lord of the Rings, so it's really sort of out there fantasy piece. But I didn't think it didn't have all the elements that what I like about soundtracks. So I think I'd go for the Inception soundtrack by Hans Zimmer.
Okay.
Hans Zimmer, again, talking about when we recorded the Disney episode, he did the Lion King soundtrack. He did the music for the Lion Song. So he technically wrote some songs with Elton John. Technically.
Interesting.
But yeah, so I think for out of the box, I'd go for the Inception soundtrack by Hans Zimmer.
Okay. Mine is a relatively new album, and it is something that I know Jake has listened to, something that you haven't listened to.
Okay.
Or not a lot of. Down in a Hole by Kiefer Sutherland.
No, I'm not. I've only listened to little bits of that actually.
There's lots of things that I listen to. I'm going to class it as kind of easy listening because it's just it's quite. There's a little bit of rocky elements to it, but it's quite a chilled out vibe throughout it. I mean, I could have gone really out of the box and said, I've been expecting you by Robbie Williams and Life Through a Lens by Robbie Williams. I really like them two albums, but it's not something. Those two albums particularly aren't something I listen to regular. Whereas Kiefer Sutherland is. Yeah, I do put on regularly. And to be fair, any of the playlists I make, like when we've just been on holiday, we did when we went on holiday the first time in July, my mum and dad took Phoebe and we took Elias with us, so we had a mummy and daddy playlist, which was things that Phoebe may not necessarily like. And then when we went again, just the four of us, we'd obviously got Phoebe with us, so we made a family playlist for a road trip. And Kiefer Sutherland features on both of them, and it's songs from the first album. So yeah, it's something that I heard on a podcast. Funnily enough, he was on, I don't know if it's Jasta's podcast or Jericho's podcast, and he said, "Oh yeah, I've always been interested in guitars, but I've actually started writing an album."
Possibly makes more sense on Jericho's than being Canadian.
Yeah.
I
was listening to both podcasts at the time and switching between which one was which. So. I was just trying to work out which one it could have been. Possibly Jericho's, because that would also... I know Jericho's not really film, but it does more of a span, whereas...
Yeah, just the music.
Just does the music or like UFC stuff. And he said, "Oh yeah, I'm doing an album, I'm going on tour." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to see him, it's Kiefer Sutherland, And I got blew away by his music straight away. So, Down in a Hole has one of my favourite songs by Kiefer Sutherland on it, which is I'll Do Anything.
I've
got two off. I've got one off each album by his. The second one is off the second album, which is Record to Me. That song is Faded Pair of Blue Jeans.
I love Faded Pair of Blue Jeans. I also like Open Road.
Yeah, that's not technically his song though.
Isn't it?
That's his producer song, and he's re-recorded it.
Interesting.
But yeah, there you go. So yeah, that's the most out of the box one. Again, I don't skip a track, and I listen to it more regularly than I do other stuff that might be more out of the box. So same as Heavy, it's not the most out of the box thing I listen to, but it's the most constant out of the box. Okay. Now we've done them two, I don't really see anything else really to do because we've kind of covered both extremes. So just pick your next.
Okay. Well, next on the list actually would be the album I've picked to represent my taste in classic rock and metal, and that is Iron Maiden's Power Slave. It covers everything that Maiden do well. So they've got Aces High, which has the historical element that I love. It covers the longer proggy aspect of what they do with Power Slave itself, the title track.
And that shouldn't say Industrial Stratego in that one.
And the third one that I'm going to mention is
Gloss.
the third one I'm going to mention covers their ability to tell a story, and that's their heavy metal retelling of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which for a song that's bordering on 15 minutes, something like that, or it's a long song.
It's a lot. I don't think it's quite that long, but it is a long song.
Yeah, to me, doesn't get boring at any point. And again, I've mentioned it in a previous episode. Having seen that live, you get a sense for just how good not just the band, or rather not just Bruce who's singing the part, but how the band joined together to tell a story. Like I said, there's plenty of other stuff, Rainbow, Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, a lot of other sort of count as more classic rock. They all come under the Power Slave banner for me. For purposes of picking one of those to represent my taste in classic rock, Power Slave's the one.
Okay. The next time I'm gonna pick, I find it hard to put into a category because it's not overly heavy, it's not proggy, it's not. I don't mean this as an insult to the album because it is one of my favourite albums, but it's kind of an album that's just there. So I think if you were to distill a lot of my tastes down on the metal side at least, it would come down to this one album, which is Indestructible by Disturbed, which I know you're not a big fan of.
Nope, I am not.
I think it's the best album they've ever recorded.
Yeah.
I think it's the most complete sound. It's got the aggression that was there on The Sickness, but contained and controlled. It's got the more melodic stuff they did on Believe and 10,000 Fists. Even though Believe I have a soft spot for because it's the first Disturbed album I bought, first album, Disturbed album I had rather. So that and the 10,000 Fists sort of more melodic lines all combined together to create a more full picture. I thought make a more full sound.
Is it with the fire, within the fire?
In the fire, inside the fire.
That's it.
Inside the Fire, which is I think arguably one of the greatest songs they've ever recorded.
I do like that one.
Really, a really good solo. It tells a really good dark story. That's what Disturbed do. Tell dark stories. You know, obviously coming home based on a true story as well. Coming home, finding his girlfriend had committed suicide, and now basically in his head he had this conversation with the devil telling him to commit suicide. And musically, it's got a fantastic guitar solo that then goes into a guitar versus bass battle, which is really cool to see live because they're actually playing the same. They're playing the same stuff. So I feel sorry for John on bass because he's playing the same as Dan, but obviously on much thicker strings that are further apart. So fair play to John for keeping up with him because Dan is one hell of a guitar player. So again, it's probably the only Disturbed album I can listen to from beginning to end without skipping a single track. There are other Disturbed albums that I like, but I might still skip a track. But Indestructible, I'll go, nope, beginning to end, fantastic. It's a really, really good song. There's also a couple of, to prove how much it evolved on that album rather, there's a couple of songs that were left over from The Sickness they then re-recorded.
All right.
So Perfect Insanity, which to be fair they did release as an early B-side.
I think they released a demo of it, didn't they?
Released a demo, and I think it was on a soundtrack for something, I want to say. Something like Ghost Ship or something like that.
All right, okay.
I don't hold me to that. It was something like that. So they re-recorded that, and it with the high production value, and the drums really hit with proper
that
heavy.
drum roll intro is brilliant.
And then
The Night.
The Night is it's not one they especially wrote that for that
Oh, right.
album. But Decide or Divide. I can't remember what it's called.
Divide, I think.
Divide. Yeah, it's not Divide. Divide was again an early song they cut from the early recordings of The Sickness, and they reevaluated it. Went, oh no, let's kind of tweak it to more modern stuff. So again, it's got that aggression from the early album, but it's more contained now. Because Disturbed are one of those bands that only work when they're angry. They only work when they're depressed, which is why I didn't think Asylum was as good an album, because they were too happy.
Yeah, a happy place, weren't
He was in a very happy place. He's got a wife. He had a kid. He was happy.
I do like Asylum.
So I think that's their weakest.
Really like
I think that's their weakest album.
It's got one of my favourite instrumental intros. Into
Oh,
a
that's
song
fantastic!
ever.
Yeah, that is fantastic. The intro.
I think just on the Disturbed thing, I think the worst album for me is 10,000 Fists.
It's definitely not one of the strongest.
Well, of the first,
Yeah.
of the first era, as such. 10,000 Fists is the worst one. Then Indestructible, and then Asylum,
Oh, okay.
and then Believe, and then Sickness.
But yeah, and then The Night, I think, is one of the best songs I've ever recorded as well. Really dark, really foreboding. One of the best solos he's ever recorded, Dan Donegan. So I think if you distill my taste in generic metal, and I don't mean this as insult to Disturbed at all.
Yeah.
But if you were to distill my taste of generic metal, generic hard rock, generic rock in general, Indestructible. And I don't mean it as an insult, because I think it's a fantastic album, but I think in the distilled form, that is a perfect album to represent that for me.
Okay. It's something that I really argued about when I was picking my albums, and I started doing it sort of chronologically of how I got into music, and I realised, and again I say this in the nicest way, much like you, James, not that I think it's a bad album, but what a band that started out somewhere and have gone to somewhere completely different is Metallica. So they are now that generic metal band, because they're not heavy anymore. Not by the standards of what has passed them. Like, they're nowhere near as heavy as Monomorph. They have heavy elements, and some of the lyrics might be heavy or whatever. But for me, the album that epitomises them at their heaviest, and the one that I again listen to possibly without skipping a track, more so because Metallica, when I skip tracks on Metallica, it's because I want to get to the next song. So like, I'll listen to most of Battery and then I want to get to the and then again I want to get to the next. So it's more of it's not a I can't bother listening to that. It's I want to get to the next song, the next guitar solo is good or whatever. So for me, and Justice for All is that album.
Okay.
And particularly, the heaviest song I think they've ever laid down is Dyer's Eve, which is the closing track, I think.
Dyer's Eve. Yeah. Really.
It's 7 or 8, I think.
Towards the end of the album, at least.
Yeah, and that would have been, if I'd have done it in the chronological order that I was going to do it, that would have been my heaviest album. And I thought, well, I listened to heavier stuff, so I couldn't pick that. So it may cover the classic rock of a fashion, because Metallica have kind of become that classic rock and metal band. It's also the generic sort of thing, because they're not what they once were. They're not those pioneers anymore. They still produce good albums.
Yeah.
Lulu aside, sorry,
Yeah.
because Lars is definitely not listening. James, mate. Hi, James. Okay, so that's 3 albums down.
3 albums down. Okay, next I'm going to cover my modern heavy taste, and I'm going to go with Shogun by Trivium. And as I mentioned earlier, I said when you mentioned going on holiday and buying the Metal Hammer, it pretty much mirrors exactly what I did, but in the run up to Shogun releasing. We were going to Greece, we went to Crete, and I bought the Metal Hammer in the WH Smiths in the airport, Manchester Airport.
Probably Manchester.
Potentially.
Yeah, probably.
Obviously they did a spread on Shogun, but they also did a track by track review
I love
from the band.
I love when
So
they do
the
that.
band explained what the song is about and how it sounds and all that. Sort
Kerrang
of thing.
did that for A Matter of Life and Death, the
Right.
guy made, and I think that's one reason I really like that album as well, because I read that breakdown. I really like that
I
album.
loved the fact I could go into it and say, "Oh right, yeah, Matty, if you said that about this one, or Paolo said this about that track, so I'm going to listen out for that." And I can tell you the sentence as well from Matt Heafy talking about "He Who Spawned the Furies," which is one of the songs I'm going to mention from the album. He said, "This song has possibly the heaviest passage that Trivium have ever written." So instantly, that's what I need to hear.
You're intrigued
that.
now,
I
yeah.
want to hear that one. The other tracks that I like to mention from that album, well, Hero Spawned the Furies, because it's got the mythology, which is about it's about Kronos getting his penis chopped off, thrown through the skies, the blood and the semen dripping out of the penis into the sea, and creating that goddess, the goddess of love.
Oh,
Aphrodite, yeah. So
You're the
what
history buff, you should be telling us.
it's not history, it's mythology. So that's what that's about, apparently. And it is, that particular bit is very heavy. The other song is torn between Scarlet and Charybdis, which is a modern day metaphor for stuck between a rock and a hard place. Scarlet and Charybdis, I don't know which one's which, but one's a sea monster and one's a massive whirlpool. And they apparently live in the Strait of Messina, which is the little strip of water that runs between Sicily and mainland Italy, right between the toe and the bowl of Sicily. And it's actually referenced quite a lot in the stories about Spartacus, because when he looked set for defeat the first time round, they escaped to Sicily, and they sort of made a sacrifice before they crossed the straits to Scala and Charybdis, so that they wouldn't be. But it's got a good sort of twiddly intro. It's a nice heavy song, and it's got the mythology aspect again, and almost historical. The other song I'm going to mention from that album is Down from the Sky.
Oh, fantastic song.
I mentioned that's sort of more of your typical modern take, angry metal band singing about politics and warlords and modern day state of the world, nuclear war and that sort of thing. The reason I'm going to mention that one though is from a personal reason, is for when we were not long since met each other, had we? We were sat.
Yeah, we hadn't known each other that long, I don't think. No.
Yeah, so we're going back a good sort of 13 and a half, 14 years roughly by this point. So that was too long to
yeah, a long time.
And we were sat at college in a side room, and the album wasn't even out yet, but they'd released that as one of the singles, hadn't they, prior to it? And we were sat listening to it. We got a little earpiece each listening to it, and just being really quite blown away by it, because it were obviously Crusaded, not long was the last effort, which a lot of people panned for it being not as heavy or Metallica rip-off, whatever you want to call it. I've got a new appreciation for that album in recent years, but at the time I thought it's alright, but it's not the best. So when Down from the Sky came out and it was sort of a return to that older Trivium sound, that was exciting to hear. But there's a bit just before the guitar solo where Matt Heath is singing and the guitars are sort of doing this really weird plod. And I actually had it explained to me by a friend that they're actually every single member of the band, apart from the drummer, are playing out of tune. They're playing out of tune in that moment to create that sound, and I just thought that was like a wonderful little thing. To have the ability to play out of tune well.
Yeah.
Out of tune as in instruments
Instrumentally out of tune, yeah. They were playing the wrong notes.
Yeah, wrong notes, yeah.
Well, I don't know, that's how he explained it to me. But
not like a natural progression, it's odd.
I'll test that again, see if I can spot that.
Yeah, so Trivium Shogun would be my modern heavy, and again that encompasses my love of Volbeat, it encompasses my love of Amon Amarth. Unfortunately, that's covered in, I say unfortunate because they are a heavier beast, obviously. They don't quite fit into the death category that I said earlier, but they are mellow death, so it's, those fall under that blanket.
Okay. Sound a completely different feel to that.
You said that every single time.
I have. Well, no, it is completely different. My next pick is Wish We Were Here by Pink Floyd. It's a fantastic album that covers a lot of things that I like. So, I'm not a big fan of prog, but I don't mind it. So that's got obviously elements of that on the album. It's an entire album that deals with one theme. It's the of isolation and absence is sort of the main themes of it. You know, like for example, you can't get more absent than the original cover, which is just a black. It's just complete black. It's
Very black.
Very black. It's just black shrink wrap. So you had to take it off to get to the actual album inside. But just on the whole, it's for the more sort of mellow things I listen to. It's a perfect example because again, Shining Crazy Diamond, the first half is almost again a soundscape. It's it's lots of different instruments coming together, creating images and creating different feelings before the lyrics don't kick in till about 7-8 minutes into the song, something like that. So it takes a while for what a lot of people would class the song to get going. But I really like that. It then goes into I can't remember around this. Welcome to the Machine, which is a really foreboding piece, singing about the machine of life, machine of being growing up, becoming an adult. Welcome to the machine where no one really gives a shit about you. It's just kind of nice, pleasant feeling.
Lovely.
Yeah, Have a Cigar on there as well, which is a really fun song, which is about Pink Floyd joining the music industry, and again to prove how absent it is, it's none of Pink Floyd who actually sing that song. I can't remember who it is, but it was someone who's recording in the studio next to them. And then got them in, because they were recording at Abbey Road, so someone in one of the other studios there, so they got them in to sing it as their manager, which has also got one of the best lines of going, oh, and by the way, which one's Pink? Which is a really fantastic line to sing in a song by Pink Floyd. And then the actual title song, Wish You Were Here, is an amazing song. That really lends to, it's got more folk elements. I don't mind elements of folk, like sort of more twiddly acoustic guitars and more lighter tones.
It's only a mood thing, though. You know what I mean? Like, if you're in that sort of mood, you can certainly find stuff like that.
I couldn't find because I'm not a big fan of folk, but there's little bits that I like that then influence other albums and influence other things. Like, there are some songs by Ralph McTell I really like, but I don't think I could listen to an entire album by Ralph McTell, even though I have been seeing him a couple of times. So it's that kind of album that represents a lot of different elements of music I like that all bleed in and influence other things. So yeah, it's just a fantastic album that I can listen to beginning to end. It kind of sums up a period of my life as well when I was really listening to that type of music a lot. So it just really kind of encapsulates all that, I'd say, that album.
Okay. My definite classic rock album, although it was released in 1990s, not the classic era of classic rock, but it's Thunder, Backstreet Symphony, their debut album. There is not, well, to my opinion, there is not a bad song on that album. There might be some that you wouldn't listen to as much as other ones, but there's everyone. My particular favourite is Englishman on Holiday. It's talking about I'm guessing, based on how the song starts and how it ends, more of the football World Cup holiday. One of my favourite lines in that song: I had a fight with this German guy. I saw him giving my girl the eye. He was trying hard to be so cool. I hit him with a stool.
Well, fair enough. Yeah.
Simple to the point.
Yeah. No beating around the bush with that one, is there?
But that's got Backstreet Symphony. That's got She's So Fine. Got Dirty Love on that one. It's just, again, much as I've said with the other ones, I don't skip a track. I listen to them all as a whole. It's an album that I listen to, and there isn't many albums that I listen to as a whole. So yeah, that's the classic rock element kind of for me.
Okay. My last album covers something I know that James certainly, but maybe not so fussed about yourself, and that's my love for country music, or rather my love for a specific kind of country. I struggled with this one because I wanted to put Chris Stapleton in there because I absolutely love Chris Stapleton, but in the end it was a last minute substitution, so honourable mention for Chris Stapleton, but I've actually gone with Blackberry Smoke. And the album I've gone with is called A Little Piece of Dixie, and the album opens with a song called Good One Coming On, and it's about basically getting together with your mates, having a few beers, listening to music, and just generally forgetting about life and the world and whatever. You just get together.
Cabin night.
Yeah. And it was the second song they played when we saw them live in London, and it was just lovely. Like, felt myself getting a bit emotional watching it because I completely buy into the message of the song of just get together, have fun, listen to a bit of music, have a drink. It's great. The other track on there, and it's a song that I always say I dedicate it to my beautiful wife, is called Bottom of This, and the opening lyrics are: I'm not trying to be a jerk, it's just that I've just got off from work, and I know you like to bend my ear. I want to listen, and that's sincere. And it's basically talking about, that passage finishes with, can't a fella have just one beer? Because the idea behind the song is, I'll deal with that love, but I'm having my beer first. And that's why I dedicate
Just
it.
give me a minute.
In a minute. Yeah, it's also quite. It displays the heavier side of the more southern rock side of Blackberry Smoke, because they are countrified, I suppose, but they're also southern rock, or sort of cross a few genres really, quite bluesy in places too. The third song on there is a song called Up in Smoke, which I suppose is their title song, if a band were to have a title song, and it's just a good, relatively heavy, fast southern rock party song. It's about going to different cities every night. So it's very reminiscent, I suppose, of Grand Funk Railroads, were an American band, because they're talking about going to a different city every night, playing the fast, sort of heavy southern rock, whatever it is, and then leaving. It's like we come, we do a thing, we go, and we're going to leave the world, let the world go up in smoke, sort of thing. So yeah, that's my last pick. That sort of covers everything I like country-wise.
Okay. Mine will be not country, not at all. No. It encompasses my more recent love of power metal and all that. So it's Sabaton Heroes, which is
cracking album.
It's a fantastic album, but it's a lot of different aspects coming together. So musically, it's through and through power metal. So there's keys in there. The riffs are just fun and boisterous and bouncy, which also kind of lends to my love of Status Quo, because it's got those good bouncing songs in there. Like I said to you the other night, can't beat a song with a good bounce in it. Yeah. You get a good pogo song, not necessarily pogo by System of a Down, but you get a good song to bounce to. It's a good part. That's the thing about power metal, it's a party atmosphere. Even though Sabaton are singing about some quite heavy stuff at times, they're still a party band. You go to have a good time. Okay, yeah, they're singing about, things that aren't necessarily party anthems. We're going to have a great time singing about the Panzer Division of the German Army. Yeah, you're going to all right. So musically, it's not heavy, but it is still quite, because it's still metal, so it's still quite heavy. But just the stories that all these songs tell, I love as well. It's one of the first albums I listened to a song, and it was telling a story. And I want to find out more about that. The song "No Bullets Fly," I think it's an amazing story, which is about a German part of the Luftwaffe was doing a dogfight in the air, and there was an American bomber flying back over, and it was shot to hell. It was limping home, and so the German Luftwaffe, instead of shooting it down and claiming another kill and would have got a Medal of Honor, decided to escort it out of Germany, escorted it to the edge of France, so it was then into basically clear skies and could go home. So he gave up honour, but for a different type of honour. And I found that a really fascinating story, that in the middle of this war, in the Second World War, that they were still they put away the grander feelings at the side. Well, no, this is an entire crew that have been shot to hell. Okay, they may have bombed my home for all I know, but they have been beaten. They're going home. Let me make sure they make it home. And as you know, the two pilots did eventually meet years later, and they became friends, I believe.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So stories like that are really good. Smoking Snakes, which is the one you were about. I can tell.
Story.
Is it? Were they Brazilian?
Brazilians? A Brazilian regiment who had actually partnered with an American regiment during World War II, and the American colonel, whoever was in command in that particular area, said, "Brazilians, we're not going to get any Brazilians fighting with us. We've got far more chance of seeing a snake smoke a cigar." So the Brazilian regiment then used for their insignia a snake smoking a cigar, which is a wonderful fuck you.
As fuck yous go, that's a pretty good one. So Night Witches, which is all about a Russian battalion of women who flew light canvas planes into Germany
under the radar.
But obviously because of the canvas, they're also silent.
Yeah.
So they didn't know they were coming until they were already bombing them. So it's an entire song about that. And of course, one of the ends, I'll get to that one in a minute, but on the end of the album, a song called Hearts of Iron, which is, again, one thing Sabaton like to do is they tell stories from people that don't necessarily have their stories told. So it's actually a story told from the German army's point of view at the end of Second World War, but about something heroic they did, which is basically when Berlin was falling, the SS were basically coming through and trying to destroy all evidence of things that are happening, and the Russians were coming down the other way, destroying everything in sight because they wanted revenge. So the German army, they did as much as they could to protect the civilians of Berlin to get out, because they knew basically if they stayed, they were dead. Yeah. So they basically sacrificed themselves to make sure everyone else got out. And it's in fact fantastic. So you don't hear about that because the German army, they're the evil Nazis, but these weren't Nazis. These were German soldiers. There's a difference, and I think Sabaton, when they talk about the Second War, they're trying to toe that line and going, yeah, the Nazis were evil, but the German officers were just German. They were German soldiers. They were doing their job. And I know it's a horrible thing. I was just doing my job, but they were protecting what they thought was the right thing for their country.
It's a wonderful thing I always remember hearing about Nazism in World War II is that the first country Nazis invaded was Germany.
Yeah,
I think that covers that
it
point
does
quite well.
So they weren't Nazis; they were Germans, and I find that it's a great story that never gets told because of who it is. And then the final song I'll talk about is "To Hell and Back," which is now their final song, which is about an American officer who basically suffered PTSD. Hence the song "To Hell and Back," and it's about him locking himself in a hotel room for a weekend to get over it, basically. All his demons confront him, and it's a true story. All his demons confront him in this one weekend, and basically he's trying to live through it and trying to basically just get everything out of his system because he can't cope. And it's got some horrible lyrics in there. If my friends must die, let them fall face down. It's so much easier to say goodbye. Things like that. And
just before the solo,
they're still haunting my dreams. They're still there when I sleep. It's heavy, but the song itself is really light and bouncy. You're jumping around to this. He saw crosses grow on Enzio, and it's a dark song, but sold in a really happy way, as daft as that sounds. And the great thing about that song is I want to remember his name and I can't. But the family of the soldier, Audi Murphy, thank you. The family of the soldier, they actually wrote to Sabaton. They said, "Thank you for writing this song," because every time his story is told, it's really kind of depressing. Oh, he had hardships. Oh no. But this song was, even though it's still talking about his demons, was celebrating his life and all the good things he did. So that was more in keeping of who he was as a person rather than the person he became because of the war. And it's just a fantastic. So in essence, it's the story all the songs tell. It's the feel the songs, the really bouncy, really energetic party sounds, atmospheres. And also, if you go onto the special edition, they do a cover of For Whom the Bell Tolls, and it's really good.
It's all right.
Okay, it's not as good as the original because it can't be as good as the original, but it's good. Oh, what's they do a Man of War song? It's called Man of War, and isn't it telling the story of Odin but through titles of Man of War songs?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Oh, so that kind of silliness
Ridiculous.
some of that type of silliness that Sabaton do.
Yeah.
I think that's an also thing comedy metal and fun.
Eurovision metal.
Yeah, it's fun. That's what power metal should be. It should be fun. Right. Okay. Yeah.
I really, really struggled because when we decided that this was going to be an episode, we said that we weren't doing compilation albums.
Okay.
Which is fine. So I have one honourable mention, which is the Buddy Holly story.
Okay.
Which I think it was to you when we were walking
Yeah,
the car the other day. I wanted to put a Buddy Holly album in there, but neither of the two main Buddy Holly albums have the amount of tracks that I would say I listen to a lot of. So the Buddy Holly story is an honourable mention, but my last album is one that I wouldn't be where I am without it, and that is What's the Story, Morning Glory by Oasis.
It's a good album. It's a good album. It is a good album.
So you will notice there is no thrash, really.
Metallica are thrash.
Yeah, they do wear one.
They still were at that time.
Thrash band.
1995. Although I got definitely maybe when it came out, and I was old enough to understand it, kind of. When they released What's the Story, Morning Glory, I was like, right, this is a band for me. This I can get on board with.
This is the band for me.
Although they do open with a really strange cover of Gary Glitter, Hello.
Do they? I don't remember that.
If you listen to that song, it's good to be back. They use the line "It's good to be back" in it quite a few times.
I'll be honest, I don't really know Gary Glitter,
which it worked really well because obviously they'd just done the Definitely Maybe thing. They'd had a time away, and then the first song that comes on that album is "It's Good to Be Back." To me, those first two albums, I don't think you can really tell them apart. I think they're both really good. The only thing that they did on What's the Story, which was slightly different, is I think between tracks 5 and 6 and 10 and 11 they put in a random bit of a song, just like an instrumental section, which is part of Swamp Song, which came on a B-side or a special edition release or something like that. But yeah, that was always going to be in there. Always going to put an Oasis album in there because it's what I grew up with. It's what I know. So yeah, there's nothing drastic there. I did put in, and I debated whether to leave it in or not, and I ended up swapping it for Lamb of God also. I really wanted to put in Dark Roots of Earth by Testament because it's a fucking great album.
That is a league above any Testament album by such a noticeable margin as well.
And it's to some extent it's a league above most thrash albums by most thrash bands, to be fair.
Yeah.
As a complete, and again, all these albums I've picked and mentioned, the honourable mention, they're all full albums. I listen to them start.
Yeah, I'm sure we've all got quite a few honourable mentions we could do. So, like for me, it's Curtain Chapter by Hell, Prequel or Opus Anonymous by Ghost.
I'm shocked that Ghost aren't been on anyone's list, but they don't really cover are wide enough that they're quite unique, aren't they? In that
they
respect?
are. Same with Hell. It's very much of that.
It could have been I don't know, like your melodic, you sing it more singy ones, but then you lose maybe some of your Blackberry Smoke, and they're not in that same realm.
Yeah.
So
from my youth, I might pick like Slipknot's original album. You know, that was on there. I didn't something I'm a big fan of, but I didn't talk about at all. I'm a big fan of female fronted vocals, so I didn't put any Nightwish on there. Battle Beast. Well, I think if I was putting Nightwish, I'd have put on Imaginarium, which a lot of people don't think is their strongest album. What? That's a net, but I think as a whole, it's their strongest album.
Yeah, I could have put Arch Enemy in.
Yeah, I think that's a problem. If we were to do 10, I think we could we'd probably find it a lot easier, but also tougher at the same time. Yeah. So I know we have also got quite a few.
I was going to do a little bit more, but I'm conscious we are running on time. So, thank you for listening this week. You've been great. We've been Cabin Night. Good night.